Okay, Chair, over to yourself.
Okay, thank you. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Joint Performance Scrutiny on 5 p.m, 16th of December 2025. May I remind everyone present that the meeting is being live streamed as well as recorded via the internet, and this recording archived for future viewing. Could all participants please mute themselves when not speaking in order to avoid any background noise or feedback when other participants are speaking? If a participant wishes to speak, they use the remote raise hand function. If a participant raises their hand via the remote function and is not subsequently invited to speak by myself, the chair, please could they turn their camera on to indicate or place a message in the chat function. When invited to address by the chair, please could all participants ensure that their microphone and camera is on to ensure that they can be seen and heard when actively participating. If this is not possible for any reason, please bring this to the attention of the chair and/or the Democratic Services Officer as soon as possible. Please ensure that all debate is raised verbally and not via the chat function for the sake of the recording. The chat function may be used to highlight any technical issues and/or to grab the attention of the chair or Democratic Services Officer. If a participant has difficulty hearing or being heard when they are addressing the committee, then they should let the chair or Democratic Officer know. So please can I welcome all committee and non-committee elected members, cabinet members, our officers, and anyone watching the live meeting broadcast. Agenda item 1 is apologies for absence. Do we have any?
Yes, Chair, to myself via Democratic Services, apologies received from Councillors Lovelock Edwards, Bruce and Hennessy this evening.
Thank you. Councillor Carroll? Councillor Carroll? Yeah, there you are.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I have joined the meeting, but will have to leave early, just to raise that.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Marshalsea?
Can I give Gareth Balls apologies, please?
Noted.
Noted, thank you. Any other apologies? I don't see anybody else with their hands up. Okay, agenda item 2 is the minutes of the meeting held on the 16th of July 2025. Are we happy with the minutes? Councillor Johnson is happy. Anybody to second? Thank you. Okay, so agenda item 3 is to receive, Councillor Thomas seconded. To receive declarations of interest and the nature of such interests. Do we have any? None in the room. Councillor Marshalsea, your hand is still up. Is that a legacy hand?
I'm so sorry, it is.
No problem. Okay, so no more declarations of interest. Okay. We will go on to item 4, which is the Vale 2030 Performance Monitoring Report, Q2 2025 to 2026. We are going to have Tom Bowring give a brief overview first before we hand over to Rob.
Good evening, members. Thanks very much indeed. I think colleagues from Democratic Services are, as we speak, going to put the presentation up on the screen for you. So just by way of a really quick introduction, great, thank you, Rhys. So the first substantive slide just shows you that this is the first of the Joint Scrutiny Committee meetings where we're going to be looking at the performance against the Council's new corporate plan, Vale 2030. And that report which is appended to your papers this evening, members, is made up of the progress against directorate plans for 2025-26. So if we can move on to the next slide, please, Rhys. That just shows the connection. When it moves on, it'll show the connection between Vale 2030 and the directorate plans. Bear with us a second, we're just having a couple of tech issues in the chamber, no probs. So, the structure of today's meeting is going to be a bit of an introduction from myself in terms of the approach to monitoring our performance, giving a bit of background in terms of the developments that we've done since we were last with you in the summer. Then Rob and I are going to take it in turns to take you through the three sections of the report. So we'll look at initially at how well are we performing against Vale 2030. Then we'll look at how we're using our resources, and then finally how effective our governance is. There'll be an opportunity, Chair and members, to pause between each of those sections for any questions and discussion before we move on, and finally any summing up and recommendations that will be made to Cabinet. The next slide shows you a little bit of background in terms of some of the ambitions that we've had in developing the performance reporting. And firstly, a thank you to elected members for all the feedback during the development of Vale 2030 and subsequently. So what we're hoping to see as we develop the performance reporting arrangements is an increasing use of technology to create more meaningful and engaging reports, and I'll touch on that in a moment. Want to give you at quarter two a really clear position mid-year in terms of the progress that we're making on delivering those commitments set out in the corporate plan. One of the things that we've had feedback on from elected members and from the regulator Audit Wales has been a desire to be more outcome focused, so talking about the impact and outcomes of our work rather than just the what we've done. So hopefully you'll be able to see that reflected in the report. Members will also note that the structure of the report this evening follows the same as for the self-assessment. So for using those three performance requirements in terms of how well we're performing, the use of our resources, and finally our governance. And the reason for doing that is to provide greater continuity between the self-assessment and then your mid-year report. And what we want to do is make sure that we're doing this in a way that gives you as much information to understand and challenge progress as possible. So the next slide just brings together some of those outcomes that we're hoping to achieve through this approach to scrutinising the council's activities. So integrated scrutiny, members of all four scrutiny committees are here this evening. The structure and content of the report is intended to give you a holistic view of performance at month 6. Focus, as I say, on those three performance requirements as a forerunner to the annual self-assessment. Work on that will start just after the new year by officers for Cabinet and committee to see in the summer. We've also introduced a performance dashboard so that members have got access to performance information whenever you want it, and also to allow you to drill into different areas of interest for yourselves. And then hopefully coming out of this evening will be some of the opportunities that you may identify, members, for further work to be done in individual scrutiny committees, either perhaps as individual reports or indeed task and finish group. So the next slide just gives you an overview of the structure of the performance report, which is appended to the committee report this evening. So it's structured around those three performance requirements. For the first time, we've introduced statements from the Chief Executive giving an overall corporate view of the Council's position at month 6, and also by each of the Council's directors. Information is given then on an objective by objective basis. So for each of the 5 wellbeing objectives, you can see the performance against the actions and where it's possible to do so against the measures, and they've got the RAG statuses that members are used to. A link is provided at page 15 to the Power BI dashboard. That gives you all of the information relating to all measures and all actions in terms of commentary. And then the performance is summarised within the report itself. As we've done with Vale 2030, we've also included within the performance report some contextual data. So this isn't information that is necessarily as a result of the Council's performance, but gives you important context in terms of what's happening in the Vale of Glamorgan. So there's some population data, employment rates, information around people's finances, for example. And then we've pulled together relevant performance information to accompany the use of resources picture. So hopefully you'll have the data to give you that kind of context, as well as then risks and regulatory work within the information on governance. The next slide just gives you, and I'm not expecting elected members to be able to read all the detail on this slide, but this is just what the dashboard landing page looks like. You can access this yourselves through the link in the report itself. I just wanted to flag that there's a user guide which is associated with the dashboard, and that's linked on the Power BI itself. You can then go through and interrogate the information as you want to do. Thank you to the elected members who were able to make the briefing that we ran last week. The information is on MemberNet if you want to watch that back and weren't able to make it. And equally, if you want to arrange a one-to-one or a small group meeting with the team, please do reach out and get in touch. So that's the approach and the content of this evening's meeting. So the next section of the presentation, I'm going to hand over to Rob, who's going to run through how well we're performing against the priorities and objectives from Vale 2030.
Okay, thank you, Tom, and through you, Chair. I'll just take you through a few of these slides just for you to have the highlights, and then open it up to questions and invite any input from any of the directors and colleagues that are present here this evening. So, in summary, in terms of the last 6 months, good progress against all 5 of the wellbeing objectives in Vale 2030. Despite that, as you would expect, there are still challenges that remain for us to make further progress on. Start probably with going back to roughly this time last year when we had the PPA, the Panel Performance Assessment. Members will recall this is an independent piece of work to assess the progress of the authority and to check the performance of the authority against the statutory framework. We also at the time asked the panel to consider our progress in producing our new draft corporate plan and also our ambition in terms of realising some of the objectives that we were drafting at that time. So since that time, I'm pleased to be able to say that all 4 of the recommendations that were made through the PPA, we have been addressing them. And we've focused on our placemaking approach. We've focused very much in terms of the signalling, the changes that we are seeing both within the organisation and beyond in our communities. Looked at the partnership working and the power of that partnership working that we have in place across the Vale of Glamorgan as an area. And looked at that recommendation in terms of governance, in terms of scrutiny and effective scrutiny in particular. So work is also alongside that being undertaken that reflects the recommendations that have come through in the Future Generations report. Some really powerful highlights from that work includes our accreditation as a real living wage authority. Some of the work we've been doing on the climate change risk assessment. I've already mentioned placemaking. And some of our preventative work as well around things like the food strategy, which has been developed in partnership with our PSB partners, and our restrictions on advertising of high fat and salt content food on some of our buildings and infrastructure, highways infrastructure. Also, some key targeted work in terms of the impact of poverty in the Vale of Glamorgan. And although this development is beyond this 6-month period, it's very recent development, it is worth reflecting on it in this report because it does bring us fully up to date. Welsh Index of Multiple Deprivation for 2025. Members had a briefing on this recently, and there are now 7 lower super output areas in the Vale that are in the top 10% most deprived areas across Wales. So we can see that there are challenges that remain, and the focus of our work going forward for the next 6 months must be to try and address some of those challenges. We've also highlighted in the report some of those budgetary challenges, as you would expect us to, but as well as the challenges in terms of finance, the opportunities and innovation being explored through our transformation programme, Reshaping, to try and do things differently, try and involve our partners and our communities more in the work that we do so we can make a real difference in those communities. So if we go to the next slide, please. Just some highlights from the last 6 months in terms of the actions and the measures in the assessment. So first of all, looking at the RAG status across all directorates, just shy of 98%, so 95 of the actions are marked as being in green, and just 2% or just over 2% are marked as being in amber. And the detail, as Tom said earlier, is in the body of the report. And then in terms of the measures, a significant chunk of those measures aren't actually applicable at the mid-year point because either they're new or it's too early to measure them. But of the ones that we can measure, 11% are green, and then just over 4% are red, which we will come on to next as exceptions. So if we move to the next slide, those exceptions are the ones that we have a RAG status of red for Q2, and 6 measures have been assigned that red status, and they're all listed on the slide. I will touch on these briefly because these are the exceptions and members may want to focus on. So first of all, fixed term exclusions from education has increased in both primary and secondary sectors, and in both cases the target of 0.02% has been missed, 0.03 in the case of primary schools and 0.27 in the case of secondary schools. I have to say, and I have to point out that aligns very much with national trends, but that said, it is a miss of that target, and we will be working hard in the months that follow to try and improve on that figure. Very much linked with fixed term exclusions is the issue of persistent absence, and that's where attendance is below the 90% level. And again, across both primary and secondary schools, these remain challenging and have missed the target of 20%. And this continues to be an area of focus for the Directorate. Non-domestic building carbon emissions has actually risen by 131 tonnes in 2024-25, instead of actually achieving a reduction target. And there's a 4% increase in electricity consumption across our estate. So that is another area of focus that we'll be looking to input into in the months that follow. Affordable housing is a challenge in the Vale, as all members know, from their work across the council. And disappointingly, during Q2, no additional affordable housing units were granted planning permission during that quarter, missing the target of 35% of all consents. All houses approved during this period didn't have a requirement for affordable housing due to the small size of the developments in question. So that with a background in planning, it's probably fair to say that that's a timing issue more than anything, and we would fully expect that to even out during the course of the year. And then finally, in terms of processing new benefit claims for council tax reduction, the target is 30 days, and on average, the process for new benefit claims fell at 36 days, or just over 36 days. And the main reason for that is there was a high volume of requests, and a high volume of those requests reflected the changes in circumstances, and that remains an area of focus for the next quarter. So if you can take me to the next slide, I will go through each of the objectives in turn. So objective 1 in Vale 2030, creating great places to live, work and visit. Achievements. So close home view, phase 2, 31 housing units delivered by the council. Coldbrook East, 20 units delivered, and then 10 units delivered at Olive Lodge. The clear message from this organisation is we want to increase the amount of affordable housing options available for residents in the Vale, and it's pleasing that those free sites add to our range and choice of affordable housing options that we have in Barry at a time when we desperately need that affordable housing. And then the second one, in terms of an achievement, implementing the shared prosperity funding stream that we've had from UK government, as well as the Transforming Towns programme. And we've launched free placemaking plans in Cowbridge, Penarth and Llantwit Major, with the plan in Barry being at draft stage and looking to follow with the Barry plan in due course. And then we've also secured the UK government funding extension for the Barry Making Waves project until March 2028. And that has included agreement on recent changes to the scheme. So we are confident that that project remains on track. Some of the challenges that we're facing, insufficient land for new housing developments. We have acute homelessness challenges in the Vale, as members will be aware of. But despite those challenges, the completion of those housing sites that I've already mentioned is important, as will be the completion of subsequent sites as well. Delivery of major regeneration projects, particularly when those projects relate to land that is either not in our ownership or with partner organisations whose agreement we need to deliver on those projects is proving challenging, but we are continuing to make headway on some of those projects, particularly in Barry. And then another challenge moving forward is going to be the delivery of the replacement local development plan, which members will be aware because it went to council recently and will continue to go through the process. So objective 2 relates to the environment and respecting and celebrating the environment. Some of the achievements here, we have a very successful trial of a soft plastic curbside collection across Penarth recently. Over 70 tonnes of soft plastic materials has been processed and reused. And that has exceeded our expectation because there's minimal contamination of those plastics. There's been really high resident participation and considerable positive feedback over the nearly 16,000 properties involved. So we will be looking to roll that out further into the Vale. We've also improved the use of our resources through effective partnership working with Keep Wales Tidy, and that supports community activity within our towns and villages, and we are looking to ramp that up into future months and years with increasing the amount of community involvement in some of the environmental work that we do. And then performance for determining planning applications for householders exceeded our targets at an exceptionally high 96.1 and 96.4% for householders and then other applications respectively. I've already referenced the challenges that we are facing in terms of some of our Project Zero commitments and some of those commitments in terms of carbon reduction. So that remains a challenge, and reducing our carbon emissions to achieve net zero by 2030 is still a very ambitious target, but one which we are committed to as the next few years go by. So if we go to objective 3, please, which is the next slide. Excellent, thank you. So here we have some achievements over the last half year. Is we have enhanced the panel system that we have in place that looks at additional learning needs dispute resolution. The additional learning needs requirement is a significant challenge for the organisation in terms of the cost and in terms of being able to ensure access to ALN. So this system enables earlier identification of barriers to engagement and a new process to inform the remodelling of the specialist provision that we have in the Vale, which is really important to parents and our young people. And we've also launched a school improvement partnership programme to enhance teaching and learning with a focus and a significant focus on reading as a main priority as part of that programme. Challenges, I've already alluded to the fact, growth in learners presenting with increasingly complex additional learning needs. We're all acutely aware of the financial resilience of the education system and particularly of our schools in the Vale. I've already mentioned that two of our measures that have been missed in the 6 months relate to the number of exclusions from our schools and also attendance levels in our schools. So you would expect me to list those on this slide as well. And if we go forward to objective 4, which is around supporting and protecting those who need us. We've enhanced our telecare service. We have a new website, a new subscription model, and as a result, there's an increased uptake for that service, which is successful. The pilot reablement intake model is showing early successes in reducing the need for care hours and improving carer handling, which is positive. We've also looked at the provision of 2 not-for-profit homes for children looked after. Those 2 are now operational, and we have a 3rd that is planned. We have also now a fully operational pre-birth pathway, which has a significant focus on prevention. And we've also successfully launched an integrated front door for children and young people services. The Wellbeing Service Matters also offers integrated support on health, social care and council matters. So big emphasis on that slide on prevention and also on the importance of how we work in partnership with our colleagues in the Health Board as well. Challenge for us is obviously our population in the Vale is an ageing population, and that continues. So there is the challenge of meeting the increasingly complex needs of that population. Okay, if we go on to the next slide. And then objective 5 is about being the best council we can be. So some key achievements here. 6 schools onboarded onto our waste collection services, saving a total of £21,000, and 11 more schools are scheduled to join that service. We've promoted the updated procurement strategy, lowers the threshold for social value in tenders and supports our commitment to social value. We've also benefited in the highways maintenance budget, sum of 4.5 million over 2 years, and that's via the local government borrowing initiative. We've enhanced our digital capabilities to improve customer outcomes and reduce contact centre demand. I will say here that one of the challenges remains is that contact centre demand. So the more we can do in this space, obviously that'll improve the waiting times and the demand for the more traditional approaches into the council services. Members will be aware that we've relaunched a dedicated scrutiny hub on MemberNet. We like to think we've got improved resources and tools on that. Members will be the judge of that. We've been recognised as a living wage employer. I mentioned this earlier. We've launched our Brilliant Basics Charter with staff and colleagues, and we're progressing the reshaping programme with 67% of the savings either achieved or mitigated at Q2, which is very positive. So if we go to the next slide, which is the challenges that we're facing in terms of meeting Objective 5, increasing demand for our services, and the budgetary pressures that we're meeting in terms of continuing to provide those services. A challenge for us is transforming services at pace. We talk very regularly about capacity within the organisation to make some of this stuff happen. And it is fair to say that if we did have increased capacity, we could transform at a faster pace. But we are currently in the space of being able to transform, but would we like to go faster? Absolutely. Service sustainability is a risk for us, and particularly given that there's a significant reliance on grant funding across the organisation and on a directorate basis. And we have limited funding in place when you consider the way we manage and maintain our key assets, our infrastructure, so our parks, our highways, our buildings, our public realm and what have you. And then we do have various workforce pressures across the organisation, including recruitment and retention challenges. And that's despite making significant headway in this area recently in terms of our approach to recruitment. And then finally, delivering some of our digital transformation. And again, I would reference that being a challenge in terms of the pace we need to go at and the capacity that we've got to deliver at that pace. I've talked for quite a while, so I'm going to pause there and back to you, Chair, to take any discussion points. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Rob. I can see we have a hand up in the room. Councillor Johnson.
Thank you very much, Chair. And thank you, Rob, as well, for that comprehensive introduction of the important points. Just to confirm that everybody here with us in the room can hear the interpretation. Can everybody hear all right? Great, I can see that you are. So thank you very much for that introduction, and thank you for Tom for the briefing to councillors last week as well. This is fairly difficult as a meeting, I think, because we are hearing a lot about the narrative, and this is familiar to many of us over the last few months, especially in some areas where the council is successful, and some of the challenges as well that we are facing as a council. But this committee is taking place, and it used to be very thorough scrutiny that took place in every single one of these subcommittees. And so it is difficult sometimes to listen here to some of these points, which are fairly broad on the situation of the council, but also focusing on the council's performance. And so I would just like to note a few points that were raised in the introduction before raising some exceptions that were also part of the report. And so the two things that worry people who contact myself is firstly the challenging financial situation facing schools and how the impact of this and the reasons behind this, of course. And we do know that in primary schools, of course, there are smaller numbers gaining access to those early years. I understand there's 10% reduction in the current cohort than a few years ago, and I'm sure this does impact, but the worry is how this is being treated, and it's important to many people. And I would like to understand a bit more about this impact, especially on areas which are in some sort of situation of poverty as well. And we did discuss this as well. Some of the reasons behind this are very interesting. Also, the waiting time for people to have contact with the call centres. This worries people very much and has been worrying people for quite some time. And so the question is how we get to grips with this as well. It's another important matter. And another point is just to note that the council has become a real living wage employer, because I did suggest this sort of thing, I think, 8 or 9 years ago. So I'm glad to see this established at last. I'm glad to see this being realised. And I'd like to concentrate next on the exceptions which are noted in the report. One point to start with, of course, is that a number of measures which are before us tonight, 145 of them are noted, but there is no RAG rating for 119 of these, so that's some 82% of the measures at the moment have nothing for us to look at as some kind of measure, as some kind of benchmark to understand how the council is performing against some sort of benchmark. So this is problematic in terms of marking or assessing. We can't even mark our own homework in this manner because there's nothing there to mark. And the two things which worry me more than anything else is where there are estimates of targets which are completely different to reality. And there are 2 points where this is obvious. One is the number of school exclusions, and this is in secondary schools. I understand that this is, yes, comparable to the rest of Wales, but it is something that we do need to address either nationally, or we need to understand why that target was set in the first instance, so far from what the reality is. The same is true of the carbon emissions. In 2019, we said that there was a climate emergency, or perhaps it was a couple of years later, but around that time, that is what we said. And if our intention is to significantly reduce this by 2030, well, it's still increasing. So there is a question there about how we are getting to grips with this, what methodology is being used to set the target in the first instance. And of course, if we are increasingly building more schools, more social housing and so on, this of course does have an impact. So the question remains how we get to grip with these critical challenges that are part of this report. And so how we set about creating some kind of plan that will be given back to us as councillors to aim at making these improvements over the next few years. Obviously, we have a new corporate head who has been appointed, and hopefully this will have a positive impact. But the fact remains that the target is currently so far removed from reality, and that causes a concern for me. A couple of very quick extra things, if I can. There is a target for the number of children who are transferred from a Welsh medium primary to a Welsh medium secondary school. And this probably is measured once a year, so that is the result for the entire year. There are 2 who are there because of ALN needs, and I would like to understand what the ALN provision is in Welsh. Thank you very much, Chair. And I will just come to a close now. I have one remaining point, and that is about, again, attendance and how this is being amber instead of red, because as far as I understand it, it's very far from the target. Thank you very much.
We do have 2 more people wanting to ask questions. Does anybody want to come back on that question before I bring anyone else in?
Chair,
Yeah.
may I?
Because there were quite a few questions there. Is it worth,
That is true.
which is fine, dealing with a few of those first, because whilst they're fresh in the memory. So
Yeah.
through you, Chair, is it possible for Liz Jones to take the education ones first?
Yeah. Thank you, Chair. Diolch, Cynghorydd Johnson. Falle bydd raid I fi ofyn eto am...
Thank you, Councillor Johnson. Perhaps I would like to be reminded of quite a few of those questions, but let's start with the exclusions. You're absolutely correct to say that the exclusions are exceeding the targets, and you asked 2 questions on this. One, whether there's a national response, and then whether we are doing something differently locally here in the Vale. Certainly, there is a government response. Earlier this year, I'd like to say probably around March, May, there was a behaviour summit arranged by Welsh Government, and this was in recognition of the fact that this is a tendency that is Wales-wide. And so it is a matter that is receiving national attention, and at the moment what's happening is essentially that we are working collaboratively and looking for some kind of national level response. So that is going on in the background, but certainly there is a tendency that is Wales-wide in terms of exclusions. In terms of what we're doing here in the Vale, we have created a working group with all of the secondary schools that we have here, because we all recognise that this is something that is a growing problem in our schools. And to be fair to the head teachers, that isn't their intention. But since there is a range of problems that these schools are dealing with, and very many of these problems are to do with very intense needs, and some of those are special needs. And so, as I'm saying, we are at the moment trying to get to grips with this situation. As schools across the authority, we don't see it as being a problem in one specific school. It's a problem that we are all facing as schools. And at the moment, we are trying to create something, an intervention that is suitable for all of us, authority-wide, so that we are all taking that responsibility for the issue. And so the intention is that I'll be able to come back to you and discuss this in greater detail with time. But just to reassure you that this is something that we do recognise, that we haven't met this target, and we are trying to get to grips with it. You then asked, I believe, about additional learning needs at secondary school. Well, we are at the moment providing something that will be opening, we hope, in the next year. We are already in discussions with our Welsh medium secondary here in the Vale, and they are very, very keen. They have been long awaiting something such as this, and so that bodes very well, because there is indeed a need for that secondary provision in ALN, so that is very much on the horizon, and we hope it'll be open very soon. And I think you then asked something else about attendance. I think that's what you asked. Yes, the question was, there's a point about attendance which has been included and been given an amber rating, whereas actually it's very far from the target. I'm just trying to find it again now. The percentage of pupils, the attendance for pupils in secondary schools, the target is 91%, and the true figure is listed as 86, which is a lot less. I would say that's pretty far from the target. So I just would like some confirmation of why this counts as amber rather than red. So in our primary schools, the attendance is increasing very well. And I have some idea, but you'll have to verify this, that we have reached the same level as pre-pandemic levels of attendance. So I would have to verify that to be entirely sure. So the reason is that we are confident that we are moving in the correct direction. But attendance has been more difficult to change in our secondary schools. And although this is true across all of our secondaries, there are differences. The attendance is more problematic in a couple of schools than it is everywhere. But we have to agree that overall, the improvement is still slower than I would like. It is recognised as a national problem, but I would also say that we have more of a problem here in the Vale, and we are looking at different measures because we are seeing that counties close by to us are succeeding better than we currently are. So we're working collaboratively with them to see what measures are effective. So we do know that there is more room for us to improve. But I would say that in the secondary sector, this is more true than in the primary. But I'm happy to come back to confirm things with you about the primary.
Chair, I know that Nikki Johns is on the line as well. So she, I think, is quite keen to come back on the call centre question about waiting times. So
Go ahead, Nikki, thank you. I think you're muted.
Head of Digital.
Oh, we've got you
can't find
now.
the mute button. So sorry, I do apologise. Apologies, I'm not able to join you this afternoon. I'm not very well and didn't want to make everyone ill just before Christmas. So with regards to the contact centre, it's really, really important that we look at this holistically as the organisation. So we're doing a lot of work at the moment on our customer charter, so ensuring that as a council we take responsibility collectively for our customer experience. We're implementing our brilliant basics, simplifying our communications so that our customers and our residents understand our communications. We're ensuring that we're really clear and we respond within our expectations, and that in its entirety will help us deliver an overall better experience. Within the actual contact centre itself, we're seeing quite high attrition at the moment, and it's in some ways quite positive because the majority of our colleagues move on within the council and they take that broader knowledge across the organisation and embed some of those customer experience behaviours. However, it leaves us with a bit of a problem short term, and historically, because we are an integrated contact centre and we take calls about almost everything across the organisation, the learning period to get a member of staff up to date is quite long. We're undertaking an evaluation of our operating model across the centre to reflect how we work. We're really, really proud of that integrated approach because not only does it mean that customers aren't passed around, it also means that we have a much better understanding of those preventative and signposting opportunities that are available to us. But the way that has changed over the last few years means that we're the model we deliver, where one person sort of handles every part of a call, means that it's taking longer to handle calls, and therefore it's creating these longer time to wait. And we are absolutely not okay with it. We desperately want to get our average speed of answer down. We want to respond quicker. We're looking again that operating model. We're examining and we'll look at the structure of how we take our calls, but also hugely technology is a massive change, and we're just in the process of relooking at our technology behind our contact centre, and a big part of that will be carefully using artificial intelligence. So we want to remain very much human-centric and use AI to support our colleagues to get to the right information as quickly as possible, reduce the average handling time, but also look at alternative channels as well. So there are many occasions where voice is absolutely the channel of choice, but there may be other alternatives. We're looking at the likes of WhatsApp for those more transactional, where the interaction might be better on what we refer to as an asynchronous channel. So very much taking the concerns of our residents, and rest assured we're not resting on our laurels at all. It's a significant part of the roadmap for Q4 of 2026. And we'll come back to you and hopefully give you much better statistics shortly.
Thank you very much, Nikki, and get well soon, please.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Franks. Oh, sorry, Robert, Tom, did you want to come in on that? Sorry. Just bear with me, Councillor.
Thank you, Chair. Just the other couple of points that Councillor Johnson raised. First one in relation to the large proportion of measures that that don't have a status associated with them. Completely agree, Councillor Johnson, that we would want to see a greater proportion of measures being reported in terms of their performance in within the year. Couple of reasons for that. This year is obviously the first of the new corporate plan, so a new suite of measures associated with it. So a large number are establishing a baseline so that next year we would look to be identifying and reporting against those. The point, though, in relation to the frequency of reporting is a well-made one. It's one we discussed at SLT over the last couple of weeks, and colleagues have committed now as part of the development of the directorate plans, which would contain these measures for the next year, to be identifying a greater number or range of measures that can have progress being reported periodically, so that they're not just annual measures. We're really keen to be able to do that because it is it's the more quantitative side that goes alongside the narrative description within the performance report. So it's a point well made, and one that we are actively actioning. The other point then in terms of carbon, and I'm going to take this away to have a look at in terms of the directorate plan for my area, because this is where this one comes from. This is a kind of complex area. One of the reasons it's complex is that we've been refining the way that we report the data. The methodology has been changing over the last few years. We've been getting better at the collection of that data, and at the moment, the way that the calculation is done of carbon emissions, it's directly correlating with expenditure. So where as an organisation we spend more money, it relates then, or it results in greater carbon emissions. That said, over time, we should see the methodology starting to stabilise, and we'd be able to get a better comparison within the carbon, the domestic carbon consumption figures. We are seeing a greater proportion of energy use in terms of electric, which is good, a reduction in gas. We're not making as much progress in terms of water as we want to, which is the reason we've invested in water monitoring. We are seeing a greater focus in terms of the activity to reduce carbon from specific activities. The Project Zero board recently had an update on the carbon management plan, and an update is going to be reported to elected members via cabinet in January on that plan. That's the main area of focus for this activity, alongside the Project Zero report, which again is going to be reported to cabinet alongside that carbon management update just after the new year.
Thank you. Was there anything else that needs to be added to that? No. In that case, I will bring in Councillor Franks.
Thank you. Reading this report, it does worry me how robust our budget process is. And I'm referring especially to the £11 million deficit for schools. Now, I'm most concerned that the schools that are under such financial pressures. I note there's around 10 schools that have received an informal notice from the authority instructing them to pay more attention to the budget. I wonder if this is the latest figure, and has there been any amendments? If schools are required to receive a balanced budget, what will be the impact on pupils, and will they be severe? I recall that schools were to receive additional support regarding budgetary control. How is that progressing? And my question and hopefully the question and answer will be highlighted to Cabinet. What is the extent of this assistance to schools to address the budget, and how effective is it? Do we have adequate number of staff who can help our 50-odd schools? And there's reference to non-recoverable deficits. What funding will cover this deficit? Will it just be written off in whole or in part? And who is going to what budget will cover this non-recoverable deficit? I'd also ask regarding environment and housing. There's long-term assets that are not being properly maintained, and there's an underfunding and a failure to meet savings as demanded by the budget. The result of this underfunding is the declining state of our roads, and I understand that many lamppost column are also nearing the end of their life, and I would appreciate comment on that as well, please. Thank you, Chair.
Who would like to take that one?
Can I just start? Because the two issues, as I see it, are very much linked, and they're linked to the budgetary challenges faced by the authority. Of course, we are responsible for the funding given to schools. The schools themselves are responsible for how they use that funding, because I'm not sure what the current rate of delegation of the school budgets are. I think it's a higher 80%, high 80%. So that money is each individual's school's money to manage as they see fit. And in the same way as any directorate within this organisation has to manage its budgets, each individual school has to manage its budgets, and that's the responsibility of the governing body. So lots of questions raised by Councillor Franks around the way budgets are managed by schools. Those questions are very relevant at the moment because, as he rightly points out, informal notices have been issued to 7 schools. In terms of the support offered to those schools, I know colleagues from the council have worked very closely with those schools. The formal warning notices haven't come out of the blue. We've worked with those individual schools for a considerable amount of time, raised these concerns with them, given the schools an opportunity to set recovery plans in place, and those formal notices have only been issued to those schools where we feel there is no immediate prospect of recovery, and where there is a very real threat and a very real risk to the financial sustainability of this organisation. Liz can come in terms of the assistance offered to schools in terms of the detail, but I am aware that there's been a lot of officer time spent supporting those schools, both officers from within the organisation as well as advice that has been brought in to support those schools. So we have a significant amount of our time being spent at the moment on that. Councillor Franks refers to non-recoverable funding gaps and non-recoverable debt. Ultimately, if schools were to fail and can't get back into a balanced budget, that onus will fall on this authority. And that is why it is such a risk to this authority in terms of the financial sustainability of this council. So doing nothing is not an option. We absolutely have to do something. We have to work with our schools. Nobody has chosen to be in this position, but nevertheless, it is a position in which we are in, and to ignore it or to let it develop and progress further to the extent that we think it could, if we did nothing, would put us at serious risk of being able to function as an authority. The scale of the issue is that significant. And what's really interesting is that the more you go into this, the more you see a very large variation across our schools. So whilst we have some schools in significant deficit, we have others that are not. So we need to explore the reasons for that, and that is what we are doing. And then Councillor Franks raises the issue of some of our assets not being maintained. He refers to our roads, refers to lampposts, and that is again reflective of the budget pressures that we are under. And it's interesting that that question is posed at the same time as the question is posed around the financial sustainability of the schools, because that goes to the budget that we have available to run all of our services across all the directorates and across all of the services that we deliver. So yeah, and that is why, as part of this report, we have raised the budget as a challenge that we are looking at next year's budget to see how we can target some of our resources to meet some of those challenges. I don't know if Liz wants to come in a little bit more detail on the schools issue.
Yeah, but thank you, Rob. You've covered most of that. But just to add to the support offered to schools, in that we've done training for governors as well, because ultimately it is the governors alongside the head teacher that has responsibility for deciding how to manage the school-based resources. And with reference to the rate of delegation, Rob was correct in saying that we are one of the highest, with the 5th highest in terms of delegation to schools. Because, of course, the Council supports the general principle that governing bodies and head teachers are best placed to decide how best to use the resources that they have. So just to make sure that governors are also aware of sort of financial management, we have provided training for governors, as well as providing the additional support that Rob has described already for our schools. Thank you.
Yep, go ahead, Lisa.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of things that Councillor Franks raised. I mean, in terms of our budget, that the most recent update only went to Cabinet very recently, so the figures in there will provide the latest information and how we're seeking to go forward. A bit more about the schools is actually, this is a similar picture actually on the whole, right across Wales. And I'm very fortunate to be the WLJ spokesperson for education, and as such I deal with the education cabinet members right across Wales. It is a similar picture. However, some local authorities have had to top slice their education budgets, and there have been varying pictures over the last, well, probably about 13 years, where we have always sought to prioritise education. It's been difficult because we can't set deficit budgets, and so we have to balance our books as we go forward. But we do recognise that schools, we can't expect them to be financial whiz kids, so we do provide support, and we don't only supply support in terms of budgeting, in terms of budget setting and monitoring and that sort of thing, but we also provided stuff like contract management, helping people to manage sometimes contracts that they might have gone into inadvisedly. We might have started providing services for them that were actually much more costly in the private sector, and there's tens of thousands have been saved that way. But I think I echo in some ways what the chief exec has said, in that the one thing that is very, very worrying at the moment is the disparity between schools, when you can actually look at schools with very, very similar demographics. And there are huge differences in their ability to deliver services for similar amounts. And it's those sorts of things that we are working with them on, because we have to move forward. And it's very, very difficult if we are arguing for an increase in education funding, which I do regularly, when somebody can look back and say, yeah, but you've got some schools that are doing okay on this, but other schools that aren't. And we actually need to help all our schools to be able to manage effectively. I also just mentioned, Councillor Franks, you mentioned about roads and resurfacing. This year, we're actually putting in one of our largest amounts ever into road resurfacing, 4 million. And it's planned that we will do the same again this year. So if you haven't noticed a difference by now, you certainly will next year, as is within the 2 years we'll have invested 8 million plus additional spend into pavements and other facilities. So hopefully that's good news coming along. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Lloyd Selby.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to officers for taking us through the report. I think there's much to celebrate within it, but if I may, I just want to focus on one of the exceptions that Rob highlighted, which was the fact that we missed the 30-day target for processing new benefit claims for council tax reduction. I understand that the standard for backdating council tax claims where people are entitled is usually 3 months. My understanding is that the Vale goes further than that, and we allow claims to be backdated for up to 6 months, which is clearly a very helpful position for the Vale to be taking. But obviously it is a matter of concern that that 30-day target is being missed, because that can create hardship for people who might be struggling. So just wondering how steps being taken to address that in the next quarter so that we can be more confident about achieving that target. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lloyd Selby, for the question, and we are within the service focusing in on that particular area of performance really closely. To give some reassurance, we obviously are measuring this performance within the team on a really regular basis. We are aware that there are delays in processing time. We have got a bigger than we want backlog of claims that we're working through. We have put through, as part of the internal discussions on the development of next year's budget, a budget pressure, looking to increase the resilience within that team. There's some work underway as part of Brilliant Basics as well, in terms of looking at how we can streamline some of the processes that the team are undertaking in order to really tackle that backlog. And we have brought in some temporary additional resource as well. So whilst the target is not where we want it, the performance is not where we want it to be, it's an area of focus, and we are tracking it really closely. And I would hope that when we get to the end of year, the next time we're reporting it to members, that we're much closer, if not hitting that target.
Chair, can I just come in very briefly?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Tom, for that reassurance. And can I just double check, am I right in thinking that where people have an entitlement to council tax reduction, that claim may be backdated for up to 6 months? Because I think that offers reassurance to residents who may have submitted a claim and may be anxious about at what point their entitlement might actually kick in.
The simple answer, Councillor Lloyd-Selby, is yes, you are right that there is provision for backdating, and I know that the scheme for council tax reduction is going to be reported to Cabinet imminently. So so full details are contained within that report about the provisions that are available to people. But yes, backdating for that period does exist, and that would take them beyond the performance at its current stage.
Thank you. I have more people here. So Councillor William, you are next. Thank you.
Bydd rhaid I
I'm going to have to wait. I'd like to wait till Elizabeth is back. Thank you.
No problem. I'll bring you back in later. Councillor Goodjohn.
Thank you, Chair. If I may, I don't believe the director's in the room with us at the moment, but I had two questions around education. Firstly, on youth services, with my youth champion hat on, I had to ask around the grant funding for our youth services, which I'm aware is somewhat running dry at the moment, and we're having problems with staff retention and recruitment in the services. So I wonder if there's any plan regarding the future of our youth services that we want to protect. I also wanted to ask a different perspective on the school budgets. We're very proud of our community-focused schools, which dramatically help reduce poverty in some of our most deprived areas, my own ward included. I wondered how we're going to protect our community-focused schools and the work that they do when we're considering the cuts that are going to have to be made to school budgets in order to balance their books. If I may make three additional points regarding poverty as a central theme around Vale 2030 and our performance work, the food strategy is extremely important when it comes to the production of good quality local food and getting that into the hands of some of our poorest residents. Are there any plans to ramp up funding around Food Vale and our warm spaces, which provide healthy meals to some of our poorest? Housing, I want to congratulate the 60 odd additional units that are presented within the report, and are there any plans on scaling up our affordable homes programme and the incredible difference that makes to the lives of people who are under our social housing compared to being left to the private sector or their own mortgages. If I may, finally, the one thing that isn't mentioned anywhere within the report is transport, which is still a significant cost for our residents. And recently we saw the first bus strike, which left many of our rural communities disconnected, and especially our oldest residents. Have we learnt any lessons from that? And are there any plans in place before the franchising scheme comes in for buses to try and support our most vulnerable communities? I know that's a lot, but thank you so much.
Does anybody want to come in on that? Okay, Tom.
Brilliant, thank you, Chair. In terms, Councillor Goodjohn, of the query around youth services and the reliance on grant funding, that was something that we were discussing at leadership team this morning, actually, in terms of the proposals that will come forward within the budget for consultation just after Christmas. It is something that on a regular basis we keep an eye on in terms of our external funding. So some further information will be forthcoming within the next few weeks. The query around the food strategy and its importance, and I think it's a point incredibly well made, and I'm grateful to all of the partners who work as part of Food Vale, and notably colleagues in health. Yes, there are plans to ramp up the the funding that is available to support food insecurity projects. We have a food insecurity group that brings together colleagues from different organisations in that partnership. The purpose of that group is to make sure we target the available resources in the most efficient and effective way as we possibly can. A large proportion of that is grant funding. It's funding that's received either by public health directly or by the council. We take a very collaborative approach though to that, and we pool in effect those resources to try and make the absolute best that we possibly can, and supplement that with any other grant funding opportunities that are available. You'll be aware as well, Councillor Goodjohn, that we've got a dedicated section of the Council's website which has got information relating to supporting people in terms of cost of living pressures. Pleased that via Welsh Government we've had 2 tranches of funding to support additional warm spaces in the Vale of Glamorgan this autumn and winter, and details of all of those are on the website. We've also made a further contribution this year to the Vale Food Bank using the cost of living reserve that was established a couple of years ago as part of the council's budget. There is a report that my colleagues have prepared for Cabinet providing an update on all of this work, and that's scheduled to go to Cabinet. I think it's the 15th of January.
Thank you, Tom. We've got Councillor Perks waiting, but we'll bring Rob in first.
Yeah, thank you. And just on the housing question, yeah, 60 additional units, much needed. Do we have plans to do more? Absolutely. We have plans to go beyond that. Members will be aware, hopefully, that we do have a partnership approach with Levels. That will enable us to scale up in terms of our new housing build programme. The key issue for us is sites and the availability of sites, but by entering into that partnership with Levels, we will be able to scale up in the market and operate in the market that has previously been reserved to some of the major house builders. So we will be able to look to get into that space that's previously been occupied by those bigger house builders and be in a position to compete with them when land is made available. So the ambition is quite clearly to scale up. That in turn reduces our demand or our need to use hotel spaces, bed and breakfast accommodation, and offers a far more dignified solution to those people who are waiting for their homes, or often their first homes, or often for a home when they've not got a roof over their heads. Reduces the requirement, more dignified, but also more cost effective as well. So that is absolutely an ambition of ours. On the transport one, that's something that comes up very, very frequently, particularly in terms of some of the more rural areas of the Vale, but also in terms of some of the areas of our urban communities in terms of being able to access services. Regular dialogue with the bus franchises, the bus companies, local services and Cardiff Bus, but also in terms of looking at our availability to expand our Green Link service, for example, particularly in some of our more rural areas. And we are looking at increasing the number of services that are provided by Green Links into the year ahead, so that that service can go into those communities where it doesn't serve at the moment. So absolutely, the issues around public transport and bus services in particular is it is a very expensive service in terms of the support that a lot of these bus companies require to run socially necessary services. And we have over the years been able to deliver a lot of those. As the funding gets harder, that gets more challenging, but we are committed because this is something people regularly tell us. If you think back to the setting of the budget previously, in terms of the resident surveys that we complete, access to services and access to public transport comes up regularly. So it's only right that we target some of our resources in that space. So hopefully, and on very finally on youth services, are we committed to continuing the services that we offer to our youth in the Vale? I think Councillor Goodjohn's comments allude to the fact that a lot of that service at the moment is grant funded and supported by Shared Prosperity Fund. We know that that is coming to an end, but we will be doing everything possible to ensure that that service continues into the year ahead. And as Tom says, we're looking at how we set the budget at the moment and how we can hopefully protect those services. And even ramp it up, given that it aligns really, really closely with that Objective 3 in Vale 2030, which is all about giving people a good start in life. So those services are absolutely a lifeline to a lot of our youth in our communities. And there was one more question. Sorry, I've written it down and I've just seen it on my sheet in front of me. School budgets and how do we square the challenges with some of the work being done in our community-focused schools? Very good question. I think the honest answer in the space that we find ourselves in is that some of that community-focused work is absolutely vital, particularly in some of those communities that we know where challenges exist. But I'd be strongly advocating that the funding that goes into that element is absolutely targeted and doesn't come out of the mainstream budget, so that one element of work doesn't impact on the other element of that budget, which is there to support the schools in the first place. And I know that sounds quite harsh, but I think that's the reality where we find ourselves at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Perks, were you wanting to come in on Councillor Goodjohn's questions?
Yes, please, Chair. Thank you. And basically, obviously, as Cabinet Member for Public Sector Housing Intense Engagement, it will be around the upscaling of house building and you know, to go off what Rob Thomas said. So, yes, we definitely do want to upscale. And as Rob said, we are in partnership with Lovells and Cardiff Council to build at scale. And I think that's a really positive thing for both the council and the residents of the Vale and those who require sort of social housing, you know, more affordable rents, and obviously houses that are built to Welsh housing quality standards and that are built to ensure that people can stay in their homes for a longer period of time. They're future-proofed. But also, you know, we've got Cosmoston, which will be another site that be built by another housing provider, but that is a requirement for 50% of social housing, affordable housing, I should say, on there. So that'll be a big positive thing for Penarth area as well, for people needing affordable homes there. So yes, we are very ambitious, and we're really proud of the houses that we've built already and the homes that we've provided for people, and also the temporary accommodation that we have down at Eagleswell as well, that takes people out of hotels and gives them their own front door while they're waiting for a more permanent home. So yes, we will be upscaling. We are proud of what we've achieved so far. So thank you.
Thank you. We do have two more people on my list, but after the second person has asked their questions, I will be drawing a line under this so we can move on to the next section of the report, as it is nearly 6:30. So, Councillor William.
Thank you very much. So this is a question regarding, well, the numbers of children who are transferring from the primary to the secondary sector within Welsh medium education. What I wanted to do was to ask, is there any plan or any measure, any additional measures on the horizon that you can realise to improve upon that percentage of 93.5% and to move it beyond the target of 95%? Additionally, as part of this, I wanted to inquire what progress has been made in terms of creating this long-awaited immersion unit here in the Vale. Thank you.
O ran
In terms of the numbers transferring, I'm sorry, I'm having an issue. I can't hear Elizabeth very well. Yes, we are in agreement that we do need to improve upon the numbers who are transferring. And we are currently working collaboratively with our secondary school here and also the primaries that feed that school to ensure that where possible, we come to an understanding in terms of what the reasons are. And to be fair, one of the reasons behind this, and I hope we'll be able to target this, is the additional learning needs. If children have ALN needs, then many of our parents decide, for whatever reason, to move their children out of the Welsh medium sector because they're very, very nervous that there won't be sufficient provision in the Welsh language by the time those children reach secondary school. And so by committing to developing provision in the secondary sector, we suspect that that will be a big help. That won't be the solution in vacuum, of course. It won't solve all of our problems, but certainly it will be something of significant importance. It's the collaboration as well. The collaboration between the schools that feed that secondary school and also the collaboration with the secondary school itself. And to be fair, our Welsh medium cluster collaborates very, very well with each other. For example, I was talking with the head teacher from the secondary school today. He has already been to a Christmas show in one of the primaries. And things like that, those connections are very important to our primary schools, so that they have time from the secondary school showing that investment. Does that answer your question, or was there something else? Yes, just to pick up on that, we also need the primaries to be coming in physically to the secondary, don't we? But I had a question as well regarding the immersion unit. An immersion unit, yes. I would have to verify that. I know there are plans for that, but I'll have to come back to you with more significant, definite information on that. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to bring in the final councillor now, Councillor Prothero.
Thank you, Chair. I've got two questions, please. The first one is for Liz, and it's to do with managing the spend in the schools. Totally respect that the budgets are delegated to the schools, but it was a recommendation actually from my committee, Corporate Performance, and it was also a recommendation from Learning and Skills a while ago that we have a procurement officer dedicated to schools, because there would be quite a lot of work that could easily help the schools in terms of collaborative spending, making sure that they don't all have separate contracts paying different things for the same thing. There could be a lot of savings there. So my question is, where are we with that, and what work has happened so far on the procurement for schools? The second question then is to do with rural transport. My ward is a rural ward. It's as far away from Barry as you could get. I think we are working in the right direction with looking at the G1 and how we can improve our community transport, making it more responsive. My question then is this: as we're going to have another look at this, is it something that we could do working with our community councils. Rather than accept this needs to improve and doing it for them, if we could do it with them and redesign it so that it fits not just our elderly, but our young people too. We've got a bus service, which is great. It's hourly. It goes from Lantert to Bridgend. But most of our teenagers in this area, they go to school in Cowbridge, which there is no direct bus for. So I think, when I say we need to redesign it, we need to make it fit our residents' needs. I'd like to do it with them. So that's my other question. Is that possible? Thank you.
If I can take the last point first. Yeah,
Thank you.
absolutely. Any opportunity to co-design local services with our community councils, with groups within our communities, we should be taking. So absolutely, I don't see any issue with that at all. In fact, I'd support it, particularly given that Green Links is a service that we currently administer, but we do have volunteer drivers. We have different booking systems for that, for those vehicles that we have. So anything we can do in partnership with our community councils would be welcome. So more than happy to pick that up and ask for that contact to be made and for a session to be held and a discussion to be held around how we can co-design that. On procurement, I'll bring Tom in if that's okay, or Liz, whoever.
I can answer part of it, and maybe Tom might want to add to it. But in terms of working with schools, I don't have the exact facts and figures in front of me, but we're working well with that, with schools and the various business managers in schools, and I've already identified a plethora of opportunities and considerable economies of scale. So if you give me time, I can bring those to you to show exactly how many contracts and all sorts of things that we have managed to rationalise and what we intend doing in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Liz. That's absolutely great. And if we could have that report at some time in the future for our resources committee, that would be wonderful. And good news, Rob. Thank you ever so much for supporting that.
Okay, thank you. That is the first section of the report. So we will now move on to the second section about resources, and I'll hand you over to Tom.
Great, thank you, Chair. As you say, that was section 1 of 3, colleagues. But I promise the next 2 are not going to be as detailed. So as we mentioned in the introduction, we've very much mirrored this report on the 3 performance requirements that you see in the self-assessment for that consistency. So the second section around the use of resources, this focuses ultimately within the legislation around value for money, economy, efficiency and effectiveness. For us as an organisation, we also add a 4th E around equity into the considerations of these things. So I'll give you just a really brief run through of some of the content within this section, and I've got colleagues here who'll be able to answer any specific questions. So in terms of activity on the people side of things, we've finished consulting on a new people strategy at the end of October. Work is underway now to finalise that strategy. Staff engagement remains a really important focus, in particular in responding to the staff survey that was run earlier on in the year, and we continue to support colleagues through the autumn and spring management development programmes. We have got challenges, as Rob mentioned earlier, in terms of capacity and workload pressures, but we are seeing some of those metrics that in terms of absence, attrition improving though over time. Turning to the council's finances, we've covered many of these issues already. There are significant demand pressures across social care, homelessness, ALN and frontline neighbourhood services. And as we mentioned previously, there is an unplanned use of reserves in the year, so we've introduced further and tighter controls in terms of spend on those reserves. mentioned previously the fact that 78% of the council savings have been achieved or mitigated at Q2, and at the moment there's slippage of about £27 million on the capital programme, but that's in the context of a capital programme of nearly £130 million for the year. In terms of the council's use of assets, progress is being made as part of our office rationalisation project. Place colleagues have recently relocated to the civic offices, and plans are in their advanced stages for social care colleagues to do the same. And during quarters 1 and 2, we've seen a number of community asset transfers completed in Llantwit Major. As a result of the Levelling Up programme, we are progressing plans to reuse the dock office as incubator space for small and medium-sized businesses, and the evaluations for the operator is advancing while we're about to move into a period of negotiation with the shortlisted bidders. Rob has touched on the transformation programme reshaping, but just to give a little bit more information, work is underway across all 5 of the elements of reshaping. Big focus around target operating model, service transformation, as well as digital in particular. During this period, the Brilliant Basics Charter has been launched. We've done lots of work in terms of potential projects for rationalisation of assets, digital transformation, as well as that workforce engagement. And the focus now in the coming months, once we have developed the plans, or the proposals rather, for the budget for 26/7, we'll be looking at the medium term. And in terms of the medium term proposals, we'll be looking at how do we leverage the real power of the council's procurement opportunities, and also looking at some of the different models that we can adopt in terms of the way that services are operated. A proposal coming to Cabinet after Christmas relating to kind of public realm and the management of neighbourhood services type activity, and members have already mentioned the corporate landlord service, 2 good examples of service transformation. And then in terms of engagement, members will be aware that we've recently concluded the latest, or the second, of the Let's Talk About Life in the Vale survey. Over 2,700 of our residents responded to that survey. We had the final report yesterday, so we're going to be spending the next few weeks looking at what it says, and we'll be reporting the results in due course. But again, useful that it's a statistically representative sample of the county's residents, so it'll be really important to help shape decision making. And members are aware of some of the large-scale engagement activity, for example, around the RDLP. Recently, you've approved the council's annual self-assessment, and also a new empty property strategy. And then just finally, members, within this section of the report, there are some details about partnership working. You'll remember that there's a recommendation as part of the panel performance assessment relating to the potential of partnership working. Pleased to report good progress is being made in terms of the review of the council's participation in strategic partnerships, and also a range of activities underway, working with other organisations. For example, the PSB Climate Change Risk Assessment, which is due to report after Christmas. Really good to see the relationship with Citizens Advice now really beginning to bear fruit. We're delivering joint debt support clinics within the civic offices, so being able to provide joined up services for people who are visiting us for information around council tax and benefits. And Rob mentioned earlier the work with town councils in terms of delivering place plans. There's a huge amount underway in terms of partnership working, so there's lots of detail within the report. But that, Chair, just gives members a bit of an overview in terms of the use of resources to support the delivery of the council's performance. So happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Tom. Do we have any questions on that section? Councillor Johnson, I knew I could count on you.
Thank you very much. I will be succinct here. I just wanted to raise a question with Tom. as the corporate officer regarding engagement and consultation. On page 36 of the attachment, there are a number of statistics regarding public attitudes towards the council, including statements such as the percentage of citizens who agree that the council is working for the good of the local people, or the percentage of citizens who believe that the council is getting to grips with the climate crisis. And those figures are very low for last year. So it says that only some 16%, so fewer than 1 in 6 people, believe that the council is working for the good of local people, or indeed is getting to grips with the climate emergency, or is providing suitable services for elderly people, and so on. I just want to confirm where these figures come from, and also how we would then analyse this if there isn't a significant increase in the new report. Thank you. I hope the question's clear for Tom there. Tom's nodding. I think it's fine.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson, for the question. And these results come from the Let's Talk About Life in the Vale survey, the first one that was done the year before last. So these questions, I'm pretty certain all of those have been asked in the survey that we've run this summer. So we'll be able to report a comparison of those. I mentioned in the introduction that Data Cymru have confirmed that the statistical validity of the sample that we've had is there, which is really strong, which means that we can do that valid comparison of the data across the 2 years. Interestingly as well, after we in effect developed this survey first in Wales in collaboration with Data Cymru, the vast majority of other local authorities have now agreed to run a similar, if not the same, data. Now, not all local authorities have committed in the same way as we have to publishing all of the results, which is going to limit our ability to compare across Wales, but where it's possible to, we will do. And the reason for suggesting looking at that comparison is that we know that there are issues in terms of public perception of different parts of our activities. So the reason why the Task and Finish work is underway, partly in terms of the Resources Scrutiny Committee, and it's also absolutely intrinsic to the review that we're leading on the council's communication strategy in terms of explaining and understanding those challenges. But yes, the results that are quoted here are from the survey, and they'll be updated now with the new results as soon as they're available.
Thank you for your answer, Tom. It's interesting to consider when you're creating a survey what sort of questions get included. And there are a series of interesting analyses which has let the council become something of a hostage to fortune in terms of some of these answers and responses. I do hope there will be an increase in the number of people who do believe that the council are providing good services, helping people and getting to grips with the nature and climate crisis and so on. But one of the things that interests me here is that this is a quantitative survey, and it would be interesting to see whether there would be differences within groups of people and how they respond to that question. Also, to consider some sort of triangulation and some qualitative work, which looks more at focus groups and so on. Because if this trend continues to be this low, then certainly there are more deep questions to be asked about the attitudes towards the council and the work that the council does. And one of the things that we have raised in sessions about this self-assessment is the difference, this gap between how the council perceives itself and the perhaps self-satisfied attitude that 85% being green is okay, and then how the public perceives the council. And this can be a reflection of the gap in those perceptions that can be seen, and I think getting to grips with that gap in perception is something we must do. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson, and absolutely, I think you're right in terms of the potential to look at triangulating some of the results here with other surveys or data sets that we have. I know colleagues in social services, for example, undertake a huge amount of engagement as part of Lance's annual director's report. And what's interesting there is that you do see the satisfaction much higher in terms of the services that are being provided. This, as you say, is a very general or population county-wide survey. So that there absolutely is something in terms of us being able to do some of that work. And I know when we first had these results, we did do some work through a number of our different forums to look at how different groups perceive the services that they provided. Certainly, in terms of the self-assessment process, part of the reason for including engagement and consultation within it is to try and make sure that we're bringing that service user and resident voice as into what is ultimately a statutory process, that is, how well have you delivered the things you said in your corporate plan and how have you used your resources. So we are very attuned to wanting to bring that resident voice in, because I know at times it can feel otherwise as if the report is maybe not as rounded, and the reason for doing this at Q2 is to give you that really holistic picture as well, which in the past you wouldn't have had, this kind of data as part of performance. Hope that helps.
Councillor Burnett.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor William. It's an interesting question. I take it right back to the start of this evening's conversations about how we actually go through this assessment. Is having everybody in the same room the right way to do it, or do we do it in the same way as we used to do, which was all individual scrutiny committees, and then we go into an education scrutiny committee and somebody wants to talk about potholes, and so we weren't getting the right mix of dialogue there. And then we talk about what people, the answers people have given us. Well, actually, those are the answers people have given us. We've asked a question and we have to take people's views on board. Now, it could be that if people are judging us on what they think a council should deliver as against what we agreed to deliver via the budget or via service plans or whatever, then that's another question we have to ask. And this is going to be a continuing discussion with with local residents about have you looked? I mean, it's an age-old question. Have you looked at potholes in February or August? And which one do you base your judgment on? Because actually it'll be a lot better in August than it is in February. Do you base your views on dog fouling on our streets in the dark nights when people tend to think it's okay because nobody will spot them, or in the summer when they're more likely to pick up? It's all very subjective in terms of views, but we have to work with that because they are the people that live in the Vale of Glamorgan, and their perception of the services that they're receiving is actually what we have to work with. And hopefully by increasing engagement, by increasing discussion, to talk to people about what we're doing. It's simple things like when we first went to separated recycling, it wasn't hugely popular because it was extra work that people wanted to do. But our residents are smashing it now, aren't they? And they're hugely, hugely proud of their performance. And when we brought the soft plastic recycling in as a trial, we smashed that target, and people across the Vale were saying, well, when are we going to have it? So it's all a question of let's just keep these conversations going. We're not totally right. I don't like some of these figures, and it'll probably end up on some random blog tomorrow saying Liz Burnett's only achieved X, Y, or Z. But that's what we work with. We are public servants. We will work with the details that the people of the Vale give us. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Thomas.
Thank you, Chair. It's kind of a follow-up to what Liz has just been saying, and the figures that were quoted by Councillor Johnson. Is there some way of triangulating the questions we're asking in such a way that we're getting? I take the point that the people who are responding to the overall Life in the Vale questionnaire survey are responding to all the questions, but I wonder whether there's some way of finding out whether those people who have direct experience of that particular service can be drawn out of the figures, so we can say, well, overall across the Vale, a lot of people don't think we're doing a great job, but those who are actually impacted by it have a different view, possibly, and whether that would give us a more accurate figure of what those who are impacted think of what's going on. And I'm just wondering if that question can be asked within the survey.
Thank you, Councillor Thomas, and we can't do it from the data or from the questions that we currently have, but I think it's a really good suggestion to have a look at. There are some questions within the survey where different perspectives are asked for in terms of, do you feel that you could do something? Have you then done it? So we can kind of look at both sides and do some of that comparison, but not in terms of the perception of satisfaction with services. But certainly what we can do is have a look at how do we compare these results with some of the other data sets that we've got elsewhere in the organisation, and see where we can make some of those comparisons, or at least we can explore the different aspects of that. So thank you for the suggestion, and it's something I'll pick up with the team in the next few weeks.
Thank you. Do we have any more questions? Oh, Councillor Goodjohn.
Yeah, just the one perhaps for Tom regarding the Brilliant Basics Charter, which is talked about in 5.3. Do we know where we're suggesting that is rolled out next? Because I'm aware when we had it at the Resources Committee, it was quite confined to council tax department and council tax reduction. So do we know where that's being planned for being rolled out next, and what lessons we've learned from it?
Thank you, Councillor Goodjohn. Couple of aspects, I guess, to the answer I'd give. We've launched the Brilliant Basics Charter in all departments of the organisation. Really important that it's something that all colleagues have access to and take really seriously. And we've launched that following it being developed collaboratively with a really big range of colleagues, notably through the spring management development sessions, where we meet with several hundred of our council colleagues, and we take on board their feedback. It was launched in the autumn sessions, which ran in October with those colleagues, and what we've done is given them the tools and the permission to go away into their service areas and to deliver Brilliant Basics in that in the best way that suits those services. Alongside that, there is a more systemic approach to rolling it out. You're right in terms of that being starting with council tax. started to do some work also within benefits as well. As part of the work that colleagues in housing are delivering in introducing a new system for managing the housing stock and our interaction with tenants. Really important opportunity to take in looking at the correspondence that we send to tenants to make sure that that is clear, accessible, etc. Something that I know has been mentioned as in feedback from the Place Scrutiny Committee previously. So there's a huge amount underway. We're also going to be using Brilliant Basics alongside some of the work that we're going to do in terms of service redesign and digital transformation. So bringing Brilliant Basics digital and looking at service redesign together. And I'm meeting the head of digital first week of January to look at the roadmap for that across the organisation and within corporate resources. All of the heads of service that I work with are currently looking at the application of those things within their service areas, because I've asked for a plan over the next 2 years to review each aspect of each of the corporate resources for main service areas. So being used in lots of different ways. Members obviously get the corporate communications, and you'll see now in the first quarter of the new calendar year lots of examples and case studies being promoted to our colleagues, making them giving them ideas, making them aware of the work that's happening right across the organisation. So I hope that helps.
Thank you. We have been at this meeting now for nearly 2 hours. Do we have anybody else wanting to ask or comment on that section? Okay, so I'm going to give you guys the choice now. We can either carry on with the third section, or we can take a quick comfort break. What would you like?
Happy to carry on, Chair.
It looks like people are happy to carry on. I don't see anybody asking for a comfort break. So, Rob, I believe it's back to you now.
Yeah, and I can be quite quick on this next slide. Okay, so in terms of this slide, information on our internal audit activity and action against the plan. So I'll deal with that first of all. 37% at sort of a 6-month period, 37% of the agreed plan has been achieved, and the remainder of the plan is well on track. 94% of all the reports received were with an opinion which was either substantial or reasonable assurance. And there is more emphasis now on engagement between the auditors and the auditees in terms of providing feedback on the audit approach and in terms of learning from the audits that have been carried out. So that's positive. In terms of the external regulatory recommendations, there's been strong progress. There have been 19 local and national actions that have been reported through our Insight Board. 18 of those actions are on track, and there is only one of the actions that is amber rated, and that is linked to the review of the Welsh Quality Housing Standards. No red actions in the first 2 quarters. And then in terms of audit findings from the reviews that have been undertaken in terms of complaint handling, school balances, deficits, and also temporary accommodation, the report and the performance against those actions and those findings are in the process of being finalised. And as you would expect, the Strategic Leadership Team and the Governance and Audit Committee and Cabinet will all have oversight to ensure that those actions are completed and closed down in a timely manner. In terms of corporate risks, we have 12 corporate risks on our risk register. Position remains unchanged from previous quarter. You have the summary table in your report. The highest risk for us in the organisation continues to be additional learning needs. 5 of the 12 risks score highly. One is financial resources, and we've touched on that already this evening. The other relates to workforce and organisational change. Climate change and nature emergency is another, and again, we've spent some time this evening discussing that. Social care demand is another one, and then the other, the fifth high risk is housing and homelessness, and we've had a number of questions on housing this evening already. The workforce and organisational development risk is one that is forecast to diminish with time. 6 risks are forecast to escalate. Information and cyber security is the first. Digital is the second. Climate and nature emergency, which is a high risk already, is set to escalate. Social care demand and capacity, a high risk already, is set to escalate. And housing and homelessness similarly. And then physical assets is the 6th risk that is forecast to escalate. And finally, in terms of scrutiny, members are already aware of the fact that we've already looked at the scrutiny arrangements since the recommendations of the PPA. We've launched a dedicated scrutiny hub for members and MemberNet, alongside updating our public website. All 4 of our scrutiny committees are now underway with task and finish work. Joint scrutiny committee is a new approach that we've put in place for annual self-assessment and for this evening. We've made a conscious effort to reduce the number of reports that are simply put to scrutiny for noting. So that is a way of increasing the value of scrutiny. And we are aware that an external review of our scrutiny arrangements will be undertaken during next year. So that's a very quick run through of the governance elements of that slide, Chair, and hopefully that helps.
Thank you, Rob. Do we have any questions or comments? Active all night and now it's tumbleweeds. Okay. Okay, so I think that's all there is about that section then. Thank you, Rob. Thank you, Tom. As far as I am aware, we have had no formal recommendations made during the debate tonight. So I am going to go with the recommendation that we have here. That is the Q2 performance report and progress towards achieving the Year 1 commitments as aligned to the Council's wellbeing objectives in Vale 2030 be noted. All commentary has been summarised for the minutes, just to let you know. Are we happy to go with that recommendation? Yes? Okay, I've got a few nods, yes. Oh, Rob?
No, can I just come in just to make it clear to members as well that there's been quite a lot of discussion this evening, a lot of questions posed. Those will all be minuted, so we'll make sure that they're captured in terms of how we take this forward.
Yes, thank you, Rob. Okay, so the recommendation has been accepted and seconded.
Happy to take the vote, Chair. No dissent, we can carry.
Yes, I would like to take this to a vote. Are we happy to vote with this? Yes. Any dissent? No. There's no hands up here, no hands up in the room. So we can carry the motion, carry the recommendation. Thank you. Item number 5 is urgent items under part 1. I have none. And there are no urgent items under part 2. So thank you very, very much for your time tonight, everybody. Before you go, I would like to say Nadolig Llawen, Merry Christmas. I'll see you all in the new year. Have a wonderful break. And I believe the next meeting for this joint performance scrutiny will be in the summer sometime. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, Chair.
Diolch.